All right, today we're diving deep into a scenario that sits right on the knife's edge of global security, a hypothetical preemptive military strike. This is Operation Red Horizon. We're going to look at the anatomy of this kind of action, the tactical precision, the strategic thinking behind it, and the global shockwaves it would create.
So picture this. The time is 2 o'clock in the morning, local time. In that pre-dawn darkness, the operation kicks off. You can almost feel the tension in the air, the low hum of advanced electronics. This is it. This is the moment where everything changes.
So let's start right at 0 hour with the strike itself. We're talking about a highly coordinated, multi-domain attack that's designed to do the most damage in the shortest amount of time possible.
This whole thing unfolds in 4 incredibly precise steps. First up, massive electronic warfare suppression. This is all about blinding the enemy's air defense systems. That whole network of radars and missiles protecting the airspace. Second, with them blinded, key long-range radars are taken out, which carves a safe corridor for the attack force. Then, and only then, does the main event begin, the primary kinetic strike. This is the physical attack, and it has to be done within an insane 15-minute window. The final step? Egress and evade. Get in, get the job done, and get out before the enemy can even figure out what hit them.
And what are they hitting? Well, we're not just talking about regular buildings. These are deeply buried, hardened facilities. The uranium enrichment sites at Natanz and Fordo, and the Iraq heavy water plant. To get to targets like that, you need specialized tools, specifically munitions like the GBU-28 bunker busters. But this isn't just about jets and bombs. It's a symphony of destruction involving Israeli Air Force strike packages, elite cyber warfare units, and critical intelligence assets on the ground, all working in perfect sync.
Okay, so that's the what. But to really get a handle on an operation of this magnitude, we have to look at the why. And that brings us to a strategic idea that has shaped policy in the region for decades.
You see, an action like this doesn't just happen in a vacuum. It follows a historical pattern, a policy known as the Begin Doctrine. The core idea is simple. Israel will not allow a hostile regional power to get its hands on weapons of mass destruction. We saw it play out in 1981 with Operation Opera against Iraq's reactor, and we saw it again in 2007 with Operation Orchard against a Syrian facility. Operation Red Horizon in this context is just the modern version of this long-standing and frankly deeply controversial doctrine. And this gets us right to the heart of the strategic dilemma. From the perspective of the planners, a nuclear-armed Iran isn't just another threat. Given the decades of hostile rhetoric and how close they are geographically, it's seen as an existential threat.
It all comes down to a specific trigger, a term you hear a lot in this space, breakout time. Now what that means, technically, is how long it would take to enrich enough uranium for just one nuclear weapon. According to the intelligence that's driving this entire scenario, that time has shrunk to less than 2 weeks. For the planners of Red Horizon, that's it. That's the red line being crossed.
But an operation like this doesn't end when the explosions stop. In fact, that's when a fierce international debate ignites, splitting the world pretty cleanly between those who justify it and those who condemn it.
And you pretty much see 2 main stories emerge. On one side, the strike is framed as the defensive shield. The argument is that it's a necessary act of preemptive self-defense, allowed under the UN Charter to prevent a much bigger catastrophe down the road. But on the other side, it's seen as the escalation trap, a straight-up illegal act of aggression that violates another country's airspace and sets a really dangerous precedent for everyone.
This quote from a critical perspective really sums up the whole counter-argument. The strike may delay the program, but it cannot destroy the knowledge. It only serves to radicalize the region further. You know, the fundamental idea here is that you can destroy a building, but you can't bomb an idea out of existence.
And this really pulls back the curtain on a whole mess of complex legal and ethical questions. For example, does this threat meet the incredibly strict Caroline test for self-defense, which says the threat has to be imminent and overwhelming? What about the legality of flying through another country's airspace without permission? And then there's the huge ethical question. What about the risk of radioactive leakage and the impact on civilians? Believe me, there are no easy answers to any of these. And these aren't just abstract debates happening in international courts. They are felt big time, right there in the immediate neighborhood. And what you see is this silent divide. Officially, the neighboring Gulf states say nothing. But privately, reports suggest there's a mix of relief from some of Iran's rivals, and at the same time, a widespread fear of retaliation. Everyone knows Iran's proxy networks in Lebanon, Syria, and Yemen would be put on high alert, basically turning the whole region into a powder keg.
And that brings us to the final piece of our analysis, the fallout. Because the consequences of a strike like this, they're not contained.
They become economic and geopolitical shockwaves that ripple across the entire globe.
The first and most immediate shockwave is felt in the global economy. Brent crude oil prices would spike, probably surging past $120 a barrel. And why? It's all because of the immediate threat of closing the Strait of Hormuz, which is one of the most important arteries for the world's energy supply.
So you can really break down the immediate global impacts into three main areas. First, that economic shock we just talked about. Second is the military response. You've got the real potential for asymmetric warfare and the mobilization of all those proxy forces. And finally, you have the diplomatic precedent. Has the bar for launching one of these preemptive strikes just been permanently lowered?
And that leaves us with the ultimate question, doesn't it? It's the one that strategists and diplomats will be debating for years. Has this kind of action normalized preemptive strikes on nuclear infrastructure? Has it, in effect, rewritten the rules of global security? What happens the next time a nation feels an existential threat from a rival's nuclear ambitions? That is the uncertain future a scenario like this creates.